Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
So hey kids, and welcome to Grumpy Nostalgia, the Second Look Cinema podcast, the show where we go back to that blockbuster new release wall in our memory, grab a copy off the shelf, pop it in the old VCR, and see what time has done to it, but probably more accurately what time has done to us. I'm Justin, that's Mike.
Cheers.
And we're here to help you navigate all those landmines glittered down memory lane. So, Mike, we're back.
Yes, it's us again, and this is a movie that's really more in your bailiwick, isn't it?
Yeah, unfortunately, I've since the little boy from 1977, I've been in a state of suspended adolescence ever since. So no complaints. But yeah, this movie is kind of taken over my life. But we'll get to that in a second. So it seems like just a few hours ago we were back in these Grumpy Lou studios recording the last show, Mike, and it's interesting. I think you were so inspired by the last some of the scenery in the last movie. You took it upon yourself to travel around the country and see some of that was so prominently showcased in the last movie, right, Mike?
You're right. Yeah. I wanted to go to the Timberline Lodge there in Oregon, which is where I ended up going, the Seattle and Oregon area. But instead of going left towards the mountains, I went right towards the coast and found some cool spots around Astoria where, hey, they filmed the Goonies, Free Willy, Kindergarten Cop. What else? Point Break and Twilight. There was multiple places where we went to film Twilight.
All right. Well,
So
now I'm interested. Yeah. Hey, is it true that the Goonies never say die, Mike? Is that still the case?
Yes, that's what Sean Astin told me. At least.
Yeah. So well, while you were out, gallivanting across the country, enjoying yourself, I was left home writing the script and researching all this data for this gloriously dumb movie. But we're glad to have you back in the Carolinas, Mike. We're very excited.
Glad to be on.
So, yeah. So speaking of excited, a lot of people of my like are very excited because we've got a lot of anticipation about the new Kenobi series coming out next week, starring
Disney Plus.
Ewan McGregor.
Yes,
Disney Plus.
Oh,
Sorry.
Yeah,
I get my streaming services confused.
Oh, you're fine. I think he makes a good young Alec Guinness.
Yes, but interesting. I think Alec Guinness was roughly a few years older than Ewan McGregor when he filmed the original Star Wars than he is now, and the age difference is quite. Let's just say Ewan looks a little bit better at that age.
Yeah, I think.
Thing about Ewan.
Yeah, I think
he never looks bad.
Yeah. No, I was just thinking. I think we should tell. I know you've mentioned him a couple of times on these podcasts. He's doing his his motorcycling trips around the world and whatnot, and he does that show.
Yeah. That's the Long Way Up. He's currently featured on the Apple Plus. Yeah, so interesting. So he always looks good. It's kind of annoying because he's roughly our age, Mike, and I've never seen him look bad except for his odd hair choice in this movie.
Oh, the little ponytail.
Yeah, he looks terrible. he looked better in Trainspotting coming out of that toilet.
Coming out of a toilet, yes.
But
I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah, but for some reason they couldn't manage to make the young Obi-Wan look cool. But so, as I mentioned, we're very excited about this show, and just about every Star Wars fan is over the moon ready for this thing to start. So we thought it would be a perfect opportunity to go back to where that story kind of all began. And of course, Mike, we're going to be looking at Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. So it doesn't seem like it's that far away to be considered nostalgia, Mike, but this was in the last century.
I know, right? Over 99. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, so how's that feel? Yeah, so it's kind of the youngest movie we've done on this format before, but when you sit down and look at the brass tacks, it's kind of an old movie, Mike. To a Gen Z or a millennial, this is an old movie. So there's all kinds of stuff to talk about on this. There's all kinds of ways to do some analysis and kind of talk about it, but in the context of what it was. But we'll just kind of go through and just kind of let the audience decide what our take is on it after all these years. And I've been a Star Wars apologist for years, Mike, so I may be a little skewed on this one.
Yeah, I think our listeners should know your I'm going to say your great field of knowledge of this subject of Star Wars. From how many different forms of media do you have the original trilogy on? What'd you
Yeah,
get?
all of them.
You got. I know you got the late.
Including Japanese laser discs. Oh yeah.
And
And
you
I
have.
think I was most proud. I was most proud of the first time I I was the first person to actually find and score the widescreen VHS copies that
Oh
before that
yeah.
was even the letterbox formats were even there. Back when you could go to the mall, we'll explain what the mall is to our younger listeners later. But you could go. They just had media plays and stores that would sell media content, hard media. You could buy physical copies of things. And I found a small video store in Orland Park, suburban Chicago, Illinois, that sold a collector's edition letterbox screen edition of all three movies, and that was a prized possession for years
Oh my
because
gosh.
nobody had seen those, except for being in the original theaters. So, yeah, but I've had them all.
That's good. And
So,
you got maybe a few hours logged on. Was it Battlefront? Is that a
yeah,
Star
yeah.
Wars game?
Shamelessly,
Yeah.
thousands of hours playing Star Wars video games, and yeah, I'm not particularly proud of any of these accomplishments. And
I just want I want to make sure our listeners know you're this is not a you're not a new kid to the rodeo on this subject.
No, not exactly. It's
See,
as I mentioned.
yeah.
I
I'm the
I
one.
saw
I'm
this
the
in the
one who's
theater.
yeah, yeah. See, I'm the
You're just
one
along for the
who's
ride.
I've seen Empire Strikes Back once. I've seen Return of the Jedi once. I've seen these prequels we just witnessed, or what first one. I saw it once in the theater, and I think part of it once later on. But that's the good part about this whole nostalgia thing is we can kind of, at least for
Yeah,
me, I have a now I'm literally looking at this movie 20 years later, and trying to
yeah.
grasp what I'm looking at because I hear people talk about Trade Federation, Republic, Empire. I'm like, who's who? So I'm still at that
No.
novice level. Let's just say.
Well, let's just call you the yin to my yang. So it's probably good that you're here
Okay.
because I'm probably a little too deep in it. So it might be a good thing to flush out through this conversation. So you can
All
kind
right,
of
perfect.
pull me back to Earth. So
Like,
so this was released on.
yes.
Sorry, go ahead.
I couldn't remember if you were one of the people who saw this the first night. Did you see this as a midnight showing?
No, actually, we'll get into that.
Okay.
It's an interesting. My first viewing is an interesting story. So this was the most anticipated movie of all time, Mike, at the time. So, and I
Agreed.
think it will always hold that title. It'll always hold that title for a couple of reasons. One, because it was just huge. And I think the second reason is I don't think anything's ever going to come close to this again because the conditions
No.
don't exist that would predicate.
Incredible hype. Yeah.
Yeah.
You think about people who went to movies.
Hype was.
Yeah, you think about people who went to
This hype
movies
was
just to
this hype,
watch the trailer.
Yeah, yeah, well, yeah. I got some notes about that. So it's this was before there was they called it the World Wide Web back then, Mike. But it was not quite. You couldn't download
Dial-up.
trailers very easy. Yeah, so I remember I was the local hero at work one day because I figured out. I think the trailer was released on Apple QuickTime. If everybody remembers that.
Oh my gosh.
And November 17th, 1998. And at the time, it set a record for 10 million downloads, Mike. That was the big thing.
So a year before it came
but I
out.
remember,
Wow.
yeah, about 6 months before. Yeah.
Oh, so, okay.
And it was cool because I remember literally stealing about 300 feet of Ethernet cable and connecting my little work computer to the local server at my work and downloading this little postage stamp size trailer, QuickTime trailer. I think it took about 6 hours to download the 1 minute 53-second trailer. But even people that did not like me at work were coming in my office and making casual conversations because they heard that. Oh, and by the way, I heard that you downloaded the Star Wars trailer. Can I take a look? But that was the kind of thing. I mean, and then you talked about the release in the attached to the certain movies trailers. So like I think the movies The Siege, Meet Joe Black, and The Water Boy. If you don't remember, the Water Boy is that Adam Sandler where he talks in the funny voice. That one. Yeah, all those movies had. Market analysts suggested that they probably had about a 30% increase in ticket volumes because all that could be attributed to people coming in, buying full price for a a ticket watching the Phantom Menace trailer and then just hightailing it out of there. Uh, so, but yeah, with the merchandising and every local newscast had they sent their local uh, reporter to the whatever the local cinema was, and they interviewed all the idiots out there in their cosplay at the time, and they're on their lawn chairs talking about how excited they were. So it was just exciting, and that thing just kind of it built for months and months and months. But yeah, and it was a big thing for sure, very very anticipated. But conditions don't exist like that anymore, and I doubt very highly
Yeah.
that by the time movies of that scale come out now, people have seen the first 7 minutes on YouTube. They've seen featurettes. They've read about it at several thousand websites. So it just
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
just
we
not
talked
the
about. I
same. But
think the last time we talked about a movie like this, it was the Batman movie with Michael Keaton. We talked about that was
yeah, yeah,
'89, and you had the people seeing the merchandise and the Happy Meals stuff go up on sale before the movie came out, and you really had no way of
yeah,
knowing other than a couple of trailers, what you were seeing. But there was so much anticipation, and I think that was
right,
the
right,
last movie before this one I could think of that had such a just a crowds queuing
yeah,
up and excited to see something like this. Was this a
yeah. So I
was
think the
this a
cool.
was this a summertime release or was it around Christmas? I couldn't remember.
No, it was released like all the Star Wars movies on in May. So this was released
It
on
wasn't
May
May. Oh,
19th,
so see there.
1999. Yeah,
There you
it's a
go.
couple of days removed from the.
Wow.
So today's actually the release date of Empire Strikes Back too. Like they all kind
Holy
of release
crap.
on that May
Okay.
period. Yeah, so a lot of anniversaries in May. Star Wars anniversaries May. But it had a $115 million budget. It was, of course, written and directed by George Lucas. So interesting thing about this is, he catches a lot of grief for this movie. Obviously, you talked about the anticipation level, and I think the cool thing about this movie is it is both the blessing and the curse of this movie. There's. I think the reason a lot of people had heartburn with this is because it just didn't live up to the expectations, which
he
were
had yeah he
entirely
right he had no
entirely
chance.
unrealistic.
Right.
What could possibly live up to this?
Yeah.
If one thing I've known about Star Wars fans is that they're always waiting for the next thing to be disappointed by. So they wait and they wait and they wait and they get something that doesn't match their fan fiction, and there's a letdown. And then the next they just start the cycle over again, and they ultimately come back to the thing they hated, and they love it again. So I think that's kind of where we fall with Phantom Menace now. So we'll try to flesh that out in this episode, and probably pick up a few other things on the way. So as I mentioned, George Lucas was the singular vision for this, kind of like Ed Wood was back in his day, Mike. But
Good comparison.
in hindsight, yeah, a lot of the research that I've looked at, it's Lucas did not want to direct these movies. He was kind of regarded that he was a little not confident really in his ability to direct. He hadn't directed a movie since the original Star Wars.
Okay.
So this was it's been quite a while since he had been in that director's chair, and he's been historically known for being kind of hard to work for. A lot of actors had some issues with the way his directing style, so he really didn't want to direct these things, and he really trying to hand it off to his buddies. Spielberg, Ron Howard, Robert Zemeckis. He pleaded with those guys to take their directors' reins, and of course those guys are going to say, no way, this is your vision. I don't trust it. You've got to do it. So not only did he not want to direct this movie, he didn't want to write the script either. He begged and begged Lawrence Kasdan, who was the original screenwriter for Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, and he got the same kind of response. He said, "No, George, we know you've been sitting on this. So he wanted to make this movie for all those years, but didn't want to get in the writer director. But he kind of sourced himself out on that one, kind of pigeonholed himself and had him do the whole thing. So
Here, help me not bust a myth, but just maybe I don't know, help me understand. Back in say early '70s, mid '70s, did he really have say the basic outline for the Phantom Menace kind of in his head? Like, obviously he started off with 4, 5, and 6, but how much
yeah.
of 1, 2, 3 did he have kind of sketched in his mind? I
Well,
guess you could.
well, the old adage that the press uses: when it comes between truth and legend, print the legend.
Correct.
uh, but yeah, for the most part, he had, when he first released this, he wanted to do this sprawling 9-part, which would become the known as the Skywalker saga.
Okay.
So it had several iterations. A lot of the stuff in this movie was kind of penciled in for Star Wars 4, the 77 release. Some of the elements of this film were originally supposed to be incorporated into that.
Oh, okay.
But I think some of the technology and it was just kind of the stuff he wanted to do was unfilmable, and I think that's why we had this long wait. 16 years since Return of the Jedi to go to the next phase, and I felt he essentially him and his team at LucasArts kind of invented the technology to make this, and boy, did they take advantage of it. This whole movie is just pretty much there's some practical effects in here, but the entire thing's essentially digital.
Yeah.
For better or for worse. So. But yeah, so it as I mentioned, it was released in May of 1999 to some fanfare. It notoriously was tied to a lot of people getting pulled out of school. A lot of kids were intentionally pulled out of school by their parents to go see this movie with them. It was called the Star Wars flu, or the Wookiee Hookie was my favorite, Mike. And market analysts estimated that about $293 million of lost American productivity was a result of people skipping out to see this on that day. But people were, they were so psyched to see this. They would leave people's deathbeds to go see this movie. They were just so ramped up. So I remember the first time I saw this movie. Mike, you and I did not know each other at the time, as I recall.
Sir. This is
before
2000.
Seems like forever.
I know, right?
Yes. So yeah, for those that are curious, Mike and I kind of met our wives, our respective wives, set us up on what can all be called a play date. I remember my wife so unceremoniously saying, "Hey, I want you to meet my friend's husband. He's funny. He likes movies and he likes sports just like you." Just like I felt like I was talking to like a third grader. But we hooked up, Mike, and we saw. I think we saw the wrestling movie, right? Beyond the Mat. Was that the first movie?
Oh my gosh, yeah, you're right. For Diamond Dallas Page.
We kind of combined our two loves of cinema and professional wrestling.
Jake the Snake
Foley, right?
Yeah,
Jake the Snake, yeah.
Okay.
A fun little documentary about the real
oh my gosh,
aspects of professional wrestling.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been a hetero love fest ever since. But me and Mike did not see this movie together. I saw it with an extremely disinterested wife. She's not a Star Wars fan, but she and typically I go to a lot of movies by myself. I don't really have a problem with that. But this was one I wanted someone to share the experience with, Mike. So I asked her to, and she begrudgingly accepted. And I think I saw this at opening day at a weird time, like 9:10 in the morning or something like that. And my takeaway from this movie, I'll never forget to this day. I saw it in suburban Charlotte, and Charlotte's a banking city. And as we sit down, as the trailers are running, I think a crew of about 12 banking bros walked in with their suits and ties still on. And they had sat down a few rows ahead of us, and they were psyched and they were pumped. And as we were getting settled in, I noticed this matronly woman walks in behind them about 10 minutes later. And she walks down to the aisles, and she's where they're sitting, and she folds her arms and just starts glaring at them. And it comes to find out that she was the bank manager, their supervisor. So she had gone to buy it. She had gone to buy a ticket, and then to go in and to scold these guys. Apparently, they left work unauthorized. And to her credit, she stood up there and made them all leave, and they all had to kind of like walk past her in shame. Yeah,
wow,
but
that's crazy.
I just thought that was funny. I almost felt bad for him for a few minutes, even though their combined salaries were probably enough to subsidize the making of this film. But some things never change, Mike. They got busted. So, Mike, you remember the first time you saw this one?
Hang on.
Where'd you see this one first?
I'm still getting over Wookiee Hookie right now. I might have seen it at the same theater you saw, but obviously the hype wasn't for me. So I remember seeing it not the first weekend, but at least into the second week, and it was, I think my wife, we're a little bit different. My wife was the one who wanted to see it more than I did probably. So yeah, she likes the Star Wars movies, so she was very excited about it. And yeah, I remember it. I remember enjoying the movie, but thinking it didn't quite feel like Star Wars to me, and that was just my initial reaction. That's all I can remember
Yeah,
from it, you know.
yeah, that's fair. I mean, that was a common criticism for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, so like I said, this year, I mean, all the movies, all the other releases got out of the way because they knew this is just going to be the set piece for 1999. There's a lot of good movies in 1999. You had
Uh-oh.
Austin Powers, you had The Matrix, you had Blair Witch, you had
Oh yeah.
it was a big year, but all those big blockbuster movies just steered clear in May. They just said, you know what, we're out. George is all yours. Take over for a while. And this movie just was in the top spot for months and months and months. So, but people were just so ready to get back into that groove and start watching all this new content for these things they had grown up with. So, had the same kind of theme, but a whole bunch of new faces with a whole new cast. So, Mike,
Hit the button.
who's in this movie, Mike?
Oh, who's in this movie? Let's see. Well, I'll go just as they went on the cast. Liam Neeson. He has a certain set of skills, and he was in
He
one of my
certainly
favorite.
does.
He was in one of my favorite movies, underrated, Dark Man. I don't know if you ever saw it. Great movie. Sam Raimi.
Yeah, nice pull. Yeah,
Yeah, one of my favorites.
yeah, that was a good one.
Yes, Ewan
He
McGregor.
took this role. He took this role without even reading the script. He just said, whatever, George, I'm in. Didn't even read the script.
Crazy. Huh. Ewan McGregor. Talked about him earlier. I knew him from Train Spotting. Other than that, I couldn't remember at the time what else he had been in before this. But great Scottish actor. Natalie Portman, opposite.
Yep.
She's not a great actress. Kind of wooden.
At the time, no.
At the time, yeah. Maybe it's gotten a little better. She may or may not currently be ripped and buff for her new role in the Thor movie. That's still
It's
debatable.
a little freaky. You're right.
Yeah.
Sure
Let's
how
see
you
who
feel
else.
about
We got
that.
Jake Lloyd. Jake Lloyd, who this is the only movie I think he was in. Obviously, he was our titular Anakin Skywalker character. Left acting after this movie. Later got arrested.
Gee, I wonder
for
why.
cruising. Later got arrested for cruising down the I-95 in South Carolina, of all places. Let's see. Oh, Samuel Jackson. He's pretty darn good in this movie, I have to say. And Frank Oz is doing Yoda. He's one of the few recurring characters, along with Anthony Daniels and Kenny Baker, I think, is R2D2.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I want to give a shout out to Terrence Stamp, one of our few returning podcast actors.
Yeah.
Who I don't understand.
Callback, yeah.
Wow, what a weak role he had in this movie. Oh my gosh, what an ineffectual character. I have no idea why he was in this movie. And then the rest of the cast is some strange creatures who get just enough screen time to sell figures.
That's a good way to put it. So yeah, that's the lineup. They took the reins with Lucas's script and tried to kickstart the franchise. So let's just get into it, Mike. You ready to do it?
Yes, sir.
Hit the button, Mike. So the movie opens up. Of course, you get that title card a long time ago in the galaxy far, far away, and just that alone got the crowd that I was with screaming. It was kind of like a pressure valve that opened, Mike. They were just so happy to get through there. So
and then they read, and then they start reading trade routes and taxation, and then you get a little worried.
You beat me to it, yeah. So you get that epic, that iconic John Williams score, kind of smacks you in the face in a good way, and the Star Wars theme comes up, and you get that scroll. And the first paragraph, it says there's a taxation of local trade routes. You're thinking, oh, thrilling! This is what I'm in for, right? But it turns out this
Senate endlessly debates.
Yeah, so we got C-SPAN, great, But yeah, so this small planet Naboo has got a trade blockade around it, and the chancellor, that is the aforementioned Terrence Stamp, leader of the Galactic Senate, dispatches these two ambassadors to kind of broker the trade dispute. So right now, here we go, pew pew pew, right, Mike? So they're out to just negotiate a trade dispute. So it's Qui-Gon Jinn, played by Liam Neeson, and then the young Obi-Wan Kenobi, who is his apprentice. played by Ewan McGregor. So they land on this Trade Federation ship, and they're met by this kind of C-3PO looking droid that kind of hosts it, puts them in the lobby. And I'm thinking of like Frank from Godfather 2. He's got me waiting in the lobby. You can't get in to see Mike.
Can of peas.
Can of peas. It's chopped liver. But yeah, so she tells them to wait in the lobby, and she goes back and talks to these giant. They're called Nemodians, Mike, and apparently they're from the planet Chinatown because they've got this weird. Yeah. So just to call back my wife and her lack of interest in Star Wars, as I'm doing my research for the show, she walks by during this scene and she goes, "Why do those guys look like basset hounds?" And I said, "Well, what are you talking about?" She said, "With the long ears." I said, "No, that's part of their hats." So she just kind of grinned non-dismissingly and went back to her cell phone, looking at her Poshmark stuff, and was never to be seen or heard again. But they find out that
I'm going to interrupt you a couple of times. I apologize. First question. Trade Federation. Trade Federation.
Yeah.
What these guys, and what are the Numidians or whatever they're called? Viceroy, no.
Yeah.
Their civilization exists in just trading. Is that what I'm gathering? Are they the Trade Federation, this whole race, or is it like the Empire?
Yeah, they're kind of like our Department of Commerce. They just kind of for the entire galaxy. However,
Okay, all right.
So I may be a Star Wars junkie, but there's a lot of stuff even I don't understand about this movie. Particularly, like why is signing this treaty so? Well, we'll get to that in a minute. But wasn't
Naboo?
I don't understand.
Key?
Palpatine's giant. He's doing the long play here, Mike. He's got a long plan to kind of seize power.
Okay.
And I don't understand why the most powerful Dark Lord of the Sith needs to worry about treaties and trade routes, but maybe we'll figure it out. Maybe we'll come to the realization. We'll just keep going. So this protocol droid tells these two bad guys that hey, bad news. These ambassadors are Jedi Knights, and they freak out. So she kind of tells on them, and then they bring up the little hologram of this hooded dark figure called Dark Sidious. Says, "Hey, dude, it's a Jedi. What are we supposed to do?" He says, "Well, kill him." So they decide that they'll just kind of gas him out in the waiting room. So they turn on the gas and then find out right away that the Jedis are like Batman. They got a utility belt. They got like a rebreather they just put on, and so they dispatched the droid army, which I think heretofore became called Clankers, Mike. The little droid army robots.
Is it just
finish off?
Yeah, is it just me or the battle droids? Or they're like more ineffectual than stormtroopers? I mean, good gosh.
Yeah, they couldn't. Yeah, they couldn't find. Wow,
their aim. They're robots. These are robots. Their aim is horrible. How do they pull this off?
How about some programming? Yeah, they make stormtroopers seem like Navy SEAls.
Yeah, at least
they go in there and they open up the door.
Yeah. Oh, it's just amazing. I mean, you could say stormtroopers.
How about programming some aiming programs and whatever. But I think we're digging too deep already.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
So they open up the doors and you see this fog, and then you see that blue and green lightsaber light up, and right there, I mean that at this point as a Star Wars fan, I'm in. You see the music kick in and the lightsabers go on. I guess I understand why they use droids for the villains in this movie, because it really kind of utilizes the abilities of the lightsaber. I think hacking people in half like human life forms, that might not play as well. So no one cares if you slice up a toaster, but so you got to see all this cool saber stuff. So they get their ride, of course, is the first thing to get exploded. So they're stuck there. So they kind of hack and slash their way down to the bowels of the ship and see that there's this giant invasion army down there. So they kind of stow away on those giant ship, and they kind of hitch a ride down to Naboo. And as they're doing that, Nemodians, the viceroys, they bring up on the screen, the view screen there, the Queen Amidala, saying that, hey, haha, you have to leave now. She says, what are you talking about? There's no one here. So they're getting gaslit. But there's an invasion pending, so they're on their way down. So they get down to the surface of Naboo, Mike, and this is where we get introduced to, going to get it out there, Mike, Jar Jar Binks.
There he is.
a point of contention in this. Let's say, to say the least, right? But as they're running away, they literally run into Jar Jar Binks, and Jar Jar is a local Gungan. There's two civilizations that live on Naboo. There's the Naboo people, and then there's the Gungans, who live kind of. I guess they live in the water. But so, Mike, how did you feel? How did you feel about Jar Jar?
I'll tell you what, I'm impressed that he's all done digitally. He's considered the first,
Yeah.
digital character ever had in a movie. And I think okay, there's your point there. But I tell you what, you watch this movie with subtitles and you see some of his vocabulary.
Oh, I did. Yeah, yeah.
Oh my god,
Wasn't it wonderful?
It made it 10 times worse to actually read it and hear it. Why?
Yeah,
George? Why?
Yeah, so I think having George having the singular vision is both a good thing for the movie and I think a bad thing, because I don't think he had enough people around him to say, hey George, to pull him aside. George, you feel good about this one? He got accused of some racial stereotyping, and he made some questionable decisions, Mike. And I think I think enough has been said about that. But
yeah, and it goes deeper than that. I mean, just there's comedy relief, and there's just eye rolling, groaning relief. I mean, it just got tiresome. When the scene where Liam Neeson drugs him off, and it shuts him up. I'm like, and Ian McGregor's like, I think you did it. I think you're a little hard on him. I was like, no, do it again.
You overdid. You overdid it.
Overdid it. Yeah, do it
well,
again.
I think it's important to point out here that again, I'm a Star Wars guy, and I always will be, regardless of the content. But the people that got really vehemently opposed to Jar Jar and all that, I think it's an important thing to point out here that a lot of people hate Jar Jar Binks. But you know who doesn't hate Jar Jar Binks? The audience that it was intended for. Kids. Yeah. Kids love this character, and at the end of the day, no matter how hard people want to be, these movies are made for children.
Yeah,
and they were in 1977. These are callbacks. Lucas has said this. These are literally callbacks to the serial movies he saw in theaters when he was a kid. The Flash Gordons and all those things.
Yeah, there's always a goofy sidekick that did silly stuff.
The double feature on Saturday. The double feature on Saturday matinee. That's what he wanted to recapture with this franchise. But
right.
But anyway, through some plot devices, they hook up with Jar Jar Binks, and he says, there's a big invasion coming. We need help. And he says, well, I can get you to Naboo, but there's a big city. Gunga City, Mike, is underwater, so he decides I'll take you home with me, even though he's not welcome there. We find out, but so they put on their little breathing apparatus, and they kind of swim. They basically just jump in a small farm pond, and then the next thing you know, they're swimming into this giant underwater kingdom. So they get to the
they get down there. I have a geography problem. They go to Gungan City, and apparently they land along with the battle droids who are going to invade Naboo and go to the palace. But when they get to Gungan City, they go through the core to warn the palace ahead of the invasion army. And I'm thinking, okay, that means the invasion army landed on the exact opposite side of the planet from where they were going to go. Why would they do that?
See, Mike, you're treading down a dangerous path here.
I'm sorry. Anyway, sorry.
I can't explain it. I won't try.
I'll abstain.
But yeah, so they get to this underwater kingdom, and they come across the big boss, Boss Nass, Mike. He's this big fatter version of Jar Jar Binks. And I only bring him up because he's played by the actor Brian Blessed. For those that may not know him, he's
Flash Gordon,
big, bulky, lovable Prince Fulton.
Yes,
he's voiced by that character.
I did not know that.
So they bring him in. They say, well, Jar Jar's been banished. He shouldn't have brought you here in the first place. Y'all can just leave. And they do a little Jedi mind trick to get a free ride. And you think, okay, well, that we get rid of Jar Jar now. But of course, for some reason, Jar Jar has to stay. So I guess Liam Neeson thinks he'll be a good navigator, Mike. And that, as it turns out, that was a great idea, because all he did was just scream and yell. Yeah,
he does not help them at all.
So they end up.
They use the Force to go through the planet.
They literally had to drug him to get him to shut up because he compromised the mission so bad. So nice directions, Jar Jar. But yeah, Mike mentioned the geographic inconsistencies, but they end up it's kind of a cool scene. You've never seen this in
Yeah.
Star Wars
I
before,
like the
but
fish.
they're kind of they've got this little submarine type ship, and they're going through the core, driving to Naboo, and they're attacked by these large aquatic creatures, which it's kind of an interesting thing. But they ultimately end up getting they surface up at the capital city, Naboo, which you think why didn't the droid ships just land there? I don't know why they decided to park on the other side of the planet.
I don't know.
And they caught up really quick too, didn't they, Mike?
Yeah,
By
they
the time
did.
they get to the surface to get to Naboo to warn the Queen, the droid army is already there, and they've already captured Queen Amidala and her council. So of course, when the Jedi arrive, it's more hack and slash, and bicycle kicks and karate and all that kind of cool stuff, and they take out the entire invasion army is pretty much taken out, but they take Natalie Portman's Padme Amidala and her crew and put her on the Queen ship, and they escape. So, and as they're doing that, some of the residual ships that are still in the blockade ships, they kind of shoot and damage the ship. So this is where we get our first kind of like questionable callbacks or needless callbacks. So as the ship's getting damaged, we see all these little mech astro droids going out on the surface and trying to fix the repair. And of course, for R2D2's there, Mike, and he's the cute little boy. He goes out there and he fixes the ship without getting shot, and he's the hero. But their ship is still damaged because their hyperdrive is damaged. So they decided that we got to find a place to land. We got to make a pit stop and get this thing fixed. So conveniently, this little sandy planet called Arrakis is there. No, Dune. Sorry, no, Tatooine.
Tatooine. Yeah.
So they land on Tatooine. They start looking for a junk dealer. So what's interesting here also, Mike, is that Queen Amidala, there's a bit of a misdirect here.
Oh yes.
The figure that they're talking to is the Queen's decoy, played by the lovely Keira Knightley. One of the few actresses that doesn't have to fake an English accent. But yeah, Keira Knightley looks so much like Natalie Portman that people on the set could literally not tell the difference when they're in full costume. So they land on Tatooine. They say, well, maybe we can find a local junk dealer to get the parts we need, because there's no auto zones on Tatooine, Mike. You got to find a
no O'Reillys.
Real place to go. No O'Reillys. So Liam Neeson takes a small little crew, and Padme wants to go with him. He doesn't want that. Of course, they bring Jar Jar along, Mike, because of course they do. Because he's
he needs to step in some poo. He needs to step in poo, and he needs to do a fart joke.
Yeah, it was funny, right? So I don't think George spent a lot of time at Second City or any kind of comedy writing training, but so he just went to the cheap gags. But so they come across this junk dealer, this wonderful little creature called Watto. His junk shop. He's kind of like a little flying rat, and I think he's voiced by Triumph, the incel comic dog. Charming little beast. Awesome. And a great plot device here. His little rat brain isn't affected by by Jedi powers. Mind tricks don't affect him, Mike. When you see this magnificent beast, you think here's a miracle of evolution that can't even be swayed by Jedi powers. But they're trying to buy parts, and they've only got galactic credits. He says, "Well, that doesn't matter out here. That don't mean anything. I need money." And of course, Qui-Gon doesn't have any cash, so they say, "Okay." So it's back to the drawing board. So as they leave, they see this little boy in the shop, a little slave boy, who essentially does all the work for Watto. And we find out that this is little Anakin, Mike.
Little Annie.
And, little Annie. Yeah. So this is our first introduction to little Jake Lloyd. You had mentioned this was his other movie prior to this was I think Jingle All the Way with Arnold Schwarzenegger. He played the little kid in that Christmas romp. But I think he was only 9 years old at the time. So the Star Wars fan base is toxic enough they're not beyond attacking a 9-year-old actor.
Well,
so
yeah,
they of course attached all their
I know
venom to him.
It's just funny that we watched a movie like The Shining last time, and that kid was great. you know.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
thought for a kid actor, and that was in 1980, and I thought he was great. And
yeah.
I mean, I understand.
But
I just don't.
but
I think there should have been a
Laurence
little bit
Olivier
more.
himself.
Yeah, I think somebody should have told George Lucas, maybe pick someone else. I know.
Maybe a little miscast, but to
Yeah,
be fair, I mean, Laurence Olivier himself could have read some of these lines, and
true.
it wouldn't go.
Excellent point.
uh, yeah, but yeah, so they're introduced to him. They just kind of go on their way, but Qui-Gon gets a little blip on his radar. Something's going on with this little kid. So as they're walking back to town, a big sandstorm kicks up, and they meet this little bastard on the street, and that's not derogatory. He is in fact little and in fact a bastard, Mike. So,
How
but
was
he says, come back to my.
Yeah, I don't want to get ahead of you, but who was his dad in Star Wars lore? Who is he supposed to be like?
Oh, we're going to get to that.
Okay,
We're going to get to that, Mike.
okay. Sorry.
Okay. One of the questionable things that Lucas did here is he took kind of the mysticism and the religious aspect out of the Force, and he tried to he had the concept of the midi-chlorians, Mike. So when they after the pod race, Qui-Gon takes some blood samples from Anakin, sends them to Obi-Wan, and it turns out that the Force is actually some sort of viral infection. But midi-chlorians are things that generate the Force, and that whole concept kind of went away right after the blowback from the fan base. But when he has a conversation with Shmi, Mike, with Shmi, uh, uh, she says that there was no father, and he suspect it was an immaculate conception, Mike. So the assumption by Qui-Gon is that the midi-chlorians created him, and they used Shmi's body as the vessel. He made him completely manifested by the midi-chlorians, thus suggesting that he's the one that could bring balance to the Force.
Like I said,
so he invites him home to his little hut, where they're introduced to his mom, Shmi, Mike.
That's so
Shmi,
bad.
Mike, yeah. So he brings him, he gives him shelter under the storm, and he's kind of showing off his little droid he's building, which again, another kind of a groany callback. He's building C-3PO, Mike.
Of course he is.
Yeah. So
member berries.
So he's trying to show off and impress Natalie Portman. So there's more out of that later. But they're sitting around eating dinner, and they're having a conversation about how they're going to get cash. And little Anakin says, "Well, there's a big pod race the next day." And a pod race is kind of it's literally just that they hook up a pod to two rocket engines, and it's kind of like a Death Race 3000 race. So, but it's big for gamblers and stuff like that. And he says, "Well, I'm human. I'm the only human that can do it, and I'd be happy to enter in this race. I've been conveniently building a pod racer all this time." He says, "I could win. I could do this. I could win the race, and you guys could have the cash to buy the parts you need." And as he's telling him this conversation, Qui-Gon's starting to understand that the kid is Force sensitive, and he's got a lot of special powers. And Obi-Wan's blind to it for some reason, but Qui-Gon says, there's something about this kid. So in a completely irresponsible move, they said, "Okay, well, this 9-year-old can get in this death race and try to win us cash so we can go back home." So that opens up to this big set piece. The major set piece in the middle of the movie here is the pod race, Mike. And it's almost like a 10-minute scene. It's a big scene.
It's the Ben Hur chariot scene.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. Yeah. So this is a really cool scene, but it had a few drawbacks. So it's kind of like a NASCAR event, Mike. It's hot, it's dirty, it's loud, and there's a lot of alien life forms in the stands. But
apparently they have pole positions apparently too. That surprised me. I didn't realize Anakin had to qualify.
So they got to go three laps around this deadly track, and it's the scenes in this movie are really cool from a special effects standpoint.
Agreed.
The speed and the crash physics are really cool. So when they're actually racing, this is kind of cool. But what kind of the groany part here is when they cut away for all the comic relief during this thing. All the kind of slapstick humor and we see that Jabba's there.
Of course.
Jabba came to the race, and he actually even brought the wife, Mike.
Yeah, yeah, she was
You look
hot
at the
lurking in
screen,
the shadows.
his his hot dumpy wife is in the background, just kind of watching the whole thing, as interested as my wife is when she's watching Star Wars. But the effects of this were really cool. And of course, Anakin wins the race, and they had kind of prior to this, they had kind of double crossed Watto to kind of overbet and overcommit, and as a result of that, they won the race, won the on the cash, and managed to win the freedom for one of the slaves. In this case, Anakin was a slave, and they won his freedom to take Anakin back. Uh, so yeah, so as they decide that, yeah, Qui-Gon wants to bring Anakin back to the Jedi Temple to see, because he again he feels that there's something about this kid. Um, so they had this heartfelt scene where he has to leave his mother and go, because they didn't win her freedom, and so they say their goodbyes and head out. So as they're doing this, we get introduced to Darth Maul, Mike, the apprentice for Darth Sidious. And when I first saw Darth Maul on the theater, I said, "Okay, this is going to be amazing.
Cool.
This guy
Yeah.
is great. He's cool. This is
Right.
really cool. There's going to be 3 movies with this guy. I can't wait to see where this is going." But he's been tracking them on this desert planet. So, of course, as they're going back to the ship to leave, Darth Maul tries to do a drive-by on Anakin, and then there's this very brief fight where Qui-Gon and Maul have a little lightsaber duel in the desert, and then they end that by him just running away as quick as they can. So that not only do they have a new Jedi, potential Jedi, they also, the Sith have been unveiled to the Jedi, and that does that. So bad things are going right, Mike.
Oh yeah.
So as they're going back to, they go back to the Jedi Council, which is on a planet called Coruscant. It's an entire city, is on the entire planet is just one big city. And there's a kind of little 2 things that happen here. One is that Anakin and gets introduced by the 2 Jedi to the Jedi Council, and this is where we see odd cast of characters sitting around the bench there. We get to see our puppetized Yoda. The movie release, he was a puppet, and I think not until like 2011's Blu-ray release they digitized him. They did a digital version of Yoda to look a little bit better. But the puppet in the theater was really terrible. Kind of looked like a shaved Oscar the Grouch. But none of the guys on the council are really hip to Anakin being. They sense something weird. They can't quite put their finger on it, but they know the kid's bad news. But of course, Qui-Gon's kind of a rogue. Decides, well, you know what, I'm going to kind of disobey and just hang on to this kid for a while. And then the other part of this, when they're back on Coruscant, is this kind of weird, as I mentioned, kind of Star Wars C-SPAN play out where there's they vote the chancellor. Our poor General Zod gets displaced for a vote of no confidence, and Senator Palpatine takes over. You can start to see there's some sort of political thing at play here as well. So at the end of all that is that Natalie Portman's, even though she just got this, you know what, I got to go back to home because my people are getting attacked and I need to be there for them. So they kind of head back. So, and that kind of sets up the third act, Mike. And the third act is just it's kind of a mess. There's 3 storylines going here, but it's essentially the giant invasion. So it's kind of fought. There's kind of 3 storylines. One is there's a straight out of the Star Wars playbook. There's a space battle to take out the mothership to kind of deactivate the whole thing. Right? So there's an invading army. That's where the Naboo and the Gungans make an alliance, and they kind of fight their planet. And this battle, battle droids, and then kind of stand off, and that's kind of a cool scene. That's kind of ground combat, and of course, Jar Jar is a general. Somehow that came into play. So he's in charge of. Maybe he did something to deserve that. We didn't see. I don't know, but he's a hot mess the entire time. He can't do anything right, yet he continues to. He probably kills like half the army by himself, but through no fault of his own. And then you have the stuff in the Naboo capital where the Jedi face off against this Darth Maul character. So that of course that's the highlight of this last set piece, is that those Jedi and Sith battles on the lightsaber. That's what everybody remembers about this movie.
Yeah, that was
But
the
it all
take
kind of
home. That was
comes
the
to a
take home
head.
for me was the two Jedi's taking on Sith.
Yeah, and then you get that amazing John Williams score, the Duel of the Fates, the stuff, and when he opens the door and he drops his cloak and then both sides of the lightsaber light up, the double lightsaber. And,
Oh yeah,
come on, how could you not like that, right? So they had this amazing fight, and there's this ground battle where the Gungans are fighting the droid army with these blue yoga balls. So I guess that's their dangerous thing. But yeah,
Bumba.
but in the middle of all this, Anakin was told to kind of hide in a spaceship and not come out. And of course, the autopilot kicks in, and of course, R2-D2 is in the ship,
Of course.
and he can't deactivate the autopilot until he's up in the air. Little Anakin feels compelled to kind of narrate everything he's doing, and this is what I liked best about the pod race scene, Mike, is not to sound too pretentious, but that's the first time you see this little 9-year-old boy. He's not chatting, he's not talking, he's serious. He's like driven, and he's mean, and
Right.
he's focused, and he can say, okay, well, I can see that as Darth Vader.
I don't think he says one word during the whole race scene.
He doesn't, and that's what's kind of cool about it. He says, okay, this is what he's really capable of.
Yeah.
But then when he gets up in space, he's
spinning. That seems like
everything.
A cool trip.
Everything he says, spinning. Yeah, this is podcasting. So, yeah, everything he says in that ship, I just want to reach through the screen and punch him. But he conveniently lands on the flight deck of this thing, and as his starfighter is kind of overheated, and he as he's pushing the buttons to fire back up, he conveniently hits the proton torpedoes. And conveniently, his ship is lined up with the nuclear generator, which and of course he takes out the engine, and all the droids on the planet go limp, and then the battle's over, and he gets out, of course, just in time. And that leads us to kind of wrap up the last bit of the movie where the Maul and Qui-Gon are fighting. And it's kind of a 2-on-1, kind of an unfair fight, really, Mike, until they get to a little area.
Force fields.
In the energy transfer room. And for the first time, they kind of get separated. So Qui-Gon and Ewan and Qui-Gon's forced to fight like a man, 1-on-1. And then at this point, we see Darth Maul kills Qui-Gon, which is, no one was really kind of expecting that, but he gets taken out. And then that just unleashes the beast for Obi-Wan. So as soon as the trap door is open, he comes in. It's just some of the greatest fight choreography I've seen in a long time. This is straight up Jackie Chan quality, great stuff. Some of the fight choreography in this scene is amazing. And Obi-Wan's kind of rage takes over, and he gets in this great fight with Darth Maul. Darth Maul kind of force pushes him over the ledge, and he's hanging on there. And then he figures out that Qui-Gon's lightsaber is still over there, so he does a little, yoga flip, and Flying Zucchini Brothers lands over and kind of slashes Darth Maul in half, and he falls down this chasm. And when this happened, I'm like, oh no, oh come on, you did not just killed Darth Maul now, because he's only got 6 minutes of screen time, Mike.
I know, that was
Jar Jar's got 4 times that.
I thought he would get injured and then
so
fly away or limp away or something,
Yeah, but and they it's just so disappointing. I think so much opportunity with that character, and they just kind of.
I definitely wouldn't think he would show up in a Han Solo movie many years later.
Yeah, well, no, that's a subject for later. Disney has decided that no one really has to die in any of their movies. When they took over all the Marvel stuff, everybody dies, but not really. In Star Wars, everybody dies, but not really. So I mean, there's no real tension left anymore. I don't know if it's just a generational thing, but when you watch Jaws, Quint dies, and Quint doesn't come back.
Yes.
There's in Jaws 2, there's no Quint. There's no mechanized Quint. There's no Quint's ghost. It's okay to have characters die in a movie. I don't understand why the trend is to. I don't know if they think the generation's too soft. I don't get it, but
right.
Yeah. But of course, everybody comes back, Mike. But yeah, so the movie's kind of wrapped up there, and at the end, Obi-Wan runs over to Qui-Gon's. His last wishes are that he take Anakin as his apprentice. And so it's a dying wish. You got to do it, right, Mike? So
Padawan.
That's so the end scene. You have his funeral, and then you see Qui-Gon's funeral, you see, little Anakin's he's got his buzz cut, his Jedi buzz cut. He's part of the tribe now, and you can't end on that bummer, so they have some weird little parade.
Oh yeah, and Chewbacca doesn't get his medal in this one either.
He does not. He still does not get his medal. Speaking of Chewbacca, there are no Wookiees in this movie, which I thought was Remember the time we saw Peter Mayhew in Atlanta?
That's right. I do like to smoke.
Dude, yeah, let me tell you something, folks. The phrase "never meet your idols." Sometimes that's a true thing. Me and Mike got to see Peter Mayhew smoking cigarettes outside of the Hilton. It had one of his handlers like brushing his hair for him. It was just like a weird thing to see.
Mm-hmm.
To this day. But hey, we saw the guy who was in Star Wars. So that's kind of cool.
There you go.
But yeah, so that movie kind of wraps up, and then I remember people walking out of the theater. There were people that were like, "Wow, that was great," and then there was about half of them were like, "What did I just see? Why do I feel this way?" you could just see it in their eyes, right?
Yeah, Mike? It was a mixed feeling, mixed bag.
But needless to say, I mean, this thing was gigantor. It ended up making $474 million. It was reached 1 billion worldwide and had a $65 million opening weekend. So
wow.
You don't get those numbers unless a lot of people see it 2 times, right? And this is back in 1999 when there's real movies and real competition. But so everybody knew that he had signed on for 3. So there's a lot of hesitancy. I think by the time the second one came out, Mike, you and I had known each other,
yep.
And I think we went to the midnight show of Attack of the Clones, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and I remember to this day, I'll never forget when we went to a midnight show, and I think what surprised me most as a ridiculously drunk people in the audience already was the theater manager came out. Remember what he said, Mike? Guys, we've seen this movie, and it doesn't suck. And everybody went crazy because everybody was psyched to see this next one, but there was some reservation. Everybody was kind of cautious and nervous about because they had been kind of burned on the first one, but
right,
yeah. So, but yeah, so it was huge, but it had this, the sequels, of course, the Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, and then paved the way for the sequel trilogy after the Disney acquisition of LucasArts material. But this was the first movie Star Wars movie that did not get any Oscars, Mike.
No special effects Oscar, really.
No, none of at least on the technical categories, none of them were won. Oh, but MTV, we always go back to MTV, Mike. They did take away the popcorn for the best action sequence. So
okay, well, thank goodness for that, huh?
It beat out the end scene of Blair Witch. I've seen the Blair Witch Project. They classified the last scene in Blair as an action scene.
Wow.
So again, nice job, MTV. Keep filming that Teen Mom.
I guess so.
But this movie had, the fallout is legendary. People have more than one occasion voiced their displeasure about this. It led to some serious PTSD for both Jake Lloyd and Ahmed Best. The vitriol from the fan base really kind of isolated these guys and really kind of pushed them out of the business. So, 20 years later, it's still there, but people have really, I think the trend now is that people have kind of warmed up to these prequel trilogies a little more. As I mentioned, now they've kind of shifted their hate to the sequel trilogies, the J.J. Abrams stuff. They've kind of misplaced some of their displeasure with these movies now. So 15 years from now, they'll come back and say how great Adam Driver was and how good The Last Jedi was. But for now, they've taken the reins as kind of the angry fan base, kind of focusing their opinion on those guys. Yeah. So, wow, that was a lot to unpack. Feel like we just went back 20 years. Let's go through the grumpy meter a little bit, Mike. So as I mentioned, my affinity to Star Wars has no bounds. So I try to go outside my body and look at this, from a different perspective. And I thought, okay, well, it's when I walked out of the theater the first time, I was immune to the external factors, and I said, okay, 5 out of 5, I'm hooked. Let's see the next one. Looking at it now as an older, more cynical guy, I don't really move much. I probably dropped down to like a 4 out of 5, Mike. But this is just still something that it just represents a good time for me in my life. It was kind of an enjoyable thing.
Right.
You don't get that feeling in movies anymore, and I think that's really I'm kind of blinded by that doctrine there. They don't make movies like this anymore. Whether they're good or bad, the experience you have with this, it just kind of trumps all the other aspects of this for me, but I will go down a little bit because you can see some of the things they could have done better. But my complaint with people that hate this movie is it's typically focused on Lucas and how Lucas betrayed them. Lucas doesn't owe you guys anything, and I guess that's an adult opinion that I've kind of fostered over the years. Is like, these movies aren't made for me, but I like them anyway. And there should be no entitlement for Star Wars fans. Lucas has given you guys enough. You're not entitled to anything better. If you don't like it, it's probably on you. So, anyway, that's my jaded opinion on it, Mike. But maybe you have something. Maybe you have a different view.
I like I said before, I wasn't a big Star Wars fan, so when I went to see it, I enjoyed the movie. I enjoyed the visuals, and the story. It was okay, but like I said, this is going on my past memory. I would say about 4 stars at the time. Looking at it now, though, I mean that's why I love this podcast, is because looking at it now, luckily I've seen parts of this movie since that first watch, so I really hadn't seen the whole thing before. So when I'm watching it this time, I'm like, I really didn't want to see it. It was the perennial like I've got a bad feeling about this, and but it's like, well, it can't be that bad. It's, like I said, the visuals I remembered. I remember I remember seeing Darth Maul. Like, wow, I can't wait to see that scene. Pod racing, maybe not.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
I gotta first off apologize to the Disney sequel a little bit. I don't like those movies that much, but after watching this, two of the main reasons a lot of the Star Wars fans don't like the Disney movies was the tone and the fact of the member berries kind of, the bringing back the old characters just to have them, I like, and I'm watching this movie and I'm thinking, wait, there's Jabba, there's Tusken Raiders, there's C-3PO, there's R2-D2, of course, and I'm watching this going, wait, Lucas did this before Disney, and then there's the
kind of shoehorn those in.
And then as far as the tone, the humor, that's what a lot of people don't like about some of the J.J. Abrams kind of, dialogue of humor in it. This had a lot of that. Obviously, some of it was sight gags, like Jar Jar stepping in poo, or the fart jokes. But
hilarious.
And that's where I kind of like had that idea. Well, this movie really is not meant for a 28-year-old me. When I was watching this, it's more meant for the kids of the time. This is a kids movie, and with adult themes, of course, with the politics and all. But the way it's done, it's it's for a kid. And I had to remember that watching this time. And it's an okay movie, but after seeing the other 2 years later and seeing the whole prequel trilogy, it worked much better as a 3-pack than as just an individual movie. Obviously, we would think a little differently nowadays. Maybe as a standalone movie, it would still be good.
Yeah, that's kind of the catch, I think, with this, is that people weighed this against the original trilogy, and it's part of the whole. It's not just that,
right.
I think that's where people got tripped up.
Yeah, I mean, right. Once you see the 3 movies together, it's a good story. I mean, the Anakin Skywalker kind of progression is, I feel like that's the whole basis for this prequel. And I think that's done very well. Eventually, it had, like I said, it takes a few years and takes 3 movies, but it works, And I think my biggest complaint about the movie, other than who it was aimed at, which was not a complaint, it's just what it is the movie is not dynamic enough. The characters, there desperately needed to be a Han Solo or a Lando in this movie, because it was kind of dry. I mean, I feel like the only scenes that kind of spiced it up was when Ian McDiarmid as the Palpatine or Samuel Jackson was on the screen. I'm like, wow, okay, this is kind of dramatic. There was actually some seriousness to there. I think a movie that follows 2 Jedi Knights around is not going to be, a fun fest.
Yeah, a little too somber. Yeah, you need like an Errol Flynn in there or something for some adventure. Right?
Like I said, you need somebody with a little pizzazz in there. I mean, Jedi Knights by their nature are not going to other than using their
They're
lightsabers.
they're
You're
they're
not-
they're essentially monks, you know, and
right,
it's kind
right.
of warrior monks, but yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, they're not fun. Yeah.
that's a good way to put it.
The fun Jedi is kind of a rare beast.
Right,
Yeah,
and I mean, but
so,
to sum it up, I said like it's a pretty movie as far as visuals and effects, and I think
oh sure,
that
yeah,
saves. I think that saves it from the kind of wooden dialogue and just the low
yeah.
pulse the movie seems to have for me at sometimes.
Those are good observations, Mike. Again, I think you kind of summarized the niche this movie falls into. It's if it's not the things you want it to be, is it really bad, or
Yeah,
what are your expectations at some point, right?
and
So
like Jar Jar Binks is really overshadows this movie when you're watching it now, and but the kids
yeah,
loved them, and
of course, yeah,
I got to look at it now as my 50-plus-year-old self and say, hey, this is,
yeah,
kids today would probably still like this movie, if you watched it for the first
yeah.
time.
Well, that's that adage, you judge things based on the audience they're created for, not
Right.
we're not going to go and critique. We're not going to go and critique ballet because we're not that niche, But this was made for kids that like sci-fi, and it hit, So
Yeah.
it kind of depends on the maturation level you have and what you come to expect, and context is really important.
And
I don't know. I encourage. Yeah.
like you said before, this movie was never going to meet expectations. It was I'm not going to say doomed from
No
the,
chance. No
not
chance.
doomed from the start, but still it was not going to hit with everybody, and that no movie should
No.
be able to hit with everybody.
I think that's called, the kids call that haters gonna hate. Mike.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's, that's a lot to unpack for this episode, guys. And we typically talk about some other things, but to be honest, me and Mike are kind of spent. I had to watch this movie 3 times, and Mike's been traveling. He compressed this in, so we're not going to talk about Star Wars anymore. We're done.
Hey.
But we do encourage everybody to go back and revisit these, and do what we did, and go outside your body and revisit them and see, was I too harsh? Or did I like it too much?
It's not as bad as you think it is.
Yeah, time fixes a lot of wounds. So it may just it may remind you how much you hated it, and put you in a bad spot. But hey, not our fault. So that's going to wrap it up, guys. We want to thank everybody for listening as usual. If you're interested in following the show, you can reach us at Grumpy Nostalgia on Instagram, and if you feel compelled to contest or question some of our brilliant observations, you can send us an email at nostalgiagrumps@gmail.com. So it's been a pleasure, and Mike, I think we're going to wrap it up. Anything you want to add?
Excuse me? This is so wizard.
You think your brain's so big. All right, Misa done. So for Mike, I'm Justin. Thanks for listening. We'll see you again next time.